America's new president, Mr. Donald J. Trump, has spoken of building a wall along the Mexican border. Mr. Trump has spoken of pulling us out of trade agreements with certain trading partners. So Mr. Trump has spoken of dismantling the Affordable Care Act. Many of these big changes are coming in the form of executive orders. Is he carrying out the will of Congress, or is he substituting his own will for the will of Congress? Congress makes the laws, the president carries them out. The chief executive is the employment boss of a number of federal departments and agencies. So the president has the power to issue directives and orders to his employees within those federal departments. So in the same way that a prosecutor has plea bargaining power over criminals, can make deals to enforce laws more stringently than others, the president also has been given wide latitude by the courts for these executive orders. In our history, there have been some very significant executive orders that really have impacted and changed the way Americans live. In 1836, President Andrew Jackson issued an executive order called the Specie Circular, which required the federal government to accept only gold and silver in payment of public lands, and maybe you know from your studies that this went on to cause the Panic of 1837. So Jackson essentially caused a depression with an executive order on banking. During the Civil War, President Lincoln issued an executive order called the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves in the states that were in rebellion. A pretty sweeping change in America and during the course of the Civil War. During World War II, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066 that detained Japanese Americans, Americans of Japanese ancestry, on grounds of national security. President Truman desegregated the military. As Commander-in-Chief, President Truman ordered that blacks and whites be in units, military units together, that there be no more segregation in the United States military as his power of Commander-in-Chief. And then President Truman actually, during the Korean War, had his Secretary of Commerce seize the steel mills of Youngstown, Ohio, while a strike was going on, so that the nation could continue to produce steel in the Korean War. However, that executive order was overturned by the Supreme Court on the grounds that the president's commander-in-chief powers did not extend to labor disputes. So the way to look at an executive order is this. Is the president carrying out the express will of Congress? Congress has made a law, and the president is carrying it out, in which case constitutionally it's fine. In another type of case, the president may make an executive order on an issue on which Congress is silent. Now it's a gray area whether the president has the authority to do that or not. And in the last case, the president might make an executive order in opposition to the will of Congress, in which case it would be unconstitutional and perhaps overturned by the Supreme Court. So that's three ways to look at an executive order: carrying out the will of Congress, doing something where Congress is silent, or opposing the Congress. Executive orders have had a wide impact and wide effect in our history. One helped to cause a depression. One freed millions of human beings from bondage. One determined who your bunkmates would be in the military. Okay? So executive orders have wide powers and scope, and I think the consequences can be far-reaching. Thank you so very much for tuning in, and I'll see you again. I'm Bob G., the History Doc.